Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today I welcome you to my newest and most painful challenge to date. The Dead Island 2 New Game Plus Masochist Kicking Only Challenge on the SOLA DLC. And now you may be asking yourself, Danny, why is this challenge harder than the rest? Well, for starters, SOLA is undoubtedly harder than the main game by itself, and on top of that we're playing on New Game Plus, which typically could be beneficial because you get to carry over all of your weapons, but we're only using our feet, so the only thing it'll provide us with is pain. And of course we're using the Masochist card, which also just adds a lot of pain. But if you're actually curious about the disadvantages, the Masochist card increases enemy health, reduces their stun time and the window for a perfect dodge, it reduces our damage, and health regeneration is a lot slower, and medkits don't work as effectively. And the cherry on top of this cake is I'm only letting myself kick or ground pound to damage enemies. No weapons, curveballs that do damage, or punching is allowed. I'll mostly be kicking, but there are a few instances where I'll need to ground pound, especially against spiky enemies that inflict bleed damage when kicked. Now to begin, I have carefully selected Danny as our Slayer for this challenge after very extensive and profound research, of course. And now we begin the challenge and head to SOLA, a Coachella meets zombie apocalypse hybrid. Wait, hold on, what are you doing here? Anyways, after heading to meet the sole survivor of the festival, we're rudely interrupted by a new Apex variant, the Whipper. And after an intense stare down and back and forth, the fight begins. I start off the fight by blocking her attacks and using the drop kick ability, but I was pretty unfamiliar with the timing for the perfect dodges, so I took a few hits, and they do a lot of damage. So naturally, I died a number of times. I ended up changing a few of my survivor cards. I switched from drop kick to jump kick because I noticed after the Whipper wasn't getting stunned and it was hitting me while I was recovering. On my final attempt, I really focused on nailing all of the perfect dodges, but I did miss sometimes, so when my health got too low, I would just run away from her until it started to regenerate. And I actually found her easier to dodge when she became enraged, so that's exactly how I finished her off.
Fantastic. Not just a cute accessory.
And in true SOLA fashion, on the way to the second quest, I was murdered by a butcher, and then a Whipper, and finally a mutator. They seriously aggressively sprinkled in the Apex variants for New Game Plus. More on that later. After finally managing to arrive at the second mission, I immediately ran into a problem, and that was the vicious butcher. Whenever I kicked it, it inflicted bleed damage to me, so I had to improvise and come up with a strategy. After multiple deaths, I decided to canvas the area before starting the mission again, and I ended up finding this little ledge I could stand on. So I started the mission again and lured the vicious butcher to the spot. And for a moment, it felt like we were star-crossed lovers, staring at each other from a balcony like Romeo and Juliet. But it ended up being short-lived and he died via ground pound. And now after dealing with him, our objective is to overload the speaker, and to do that we have to kill the zombies while they're connected to it. I didn't have too hard of a time with this, and crushers are pretty easy to dodge. I just finished him off by luring him over to this electrocuted puddle. After blowing up the speaker, we had to do the same thing in the indie zone, but of course, you guessed it, we got ambushed by two butchers on the way. The start of this fight instantly throws a Whipper at you, but luckily after the boss fight, I've got her attacks pretty down pat, so I took her out easily. As for destroying the speaker, I used the same strategy as the last time. I tried to damage the zombies as much as I could, and then I'd throw a meat bait at the speaker and finish them off there. But of course, right after the speaker explodes, a screamer spawned in, but I ended up making quick work of her. After our rendezvous with Grace, we needed to go investigate the eco-village, but you probably already know what happened on the way. So I ran back to the base camp and patiently waited for them to go away. And the second I had a clearing, I flipped my Crocs into sport mode and beelined to the eco-village. There, I made my presence known and made quick work of this walker. After a bit of exploring, I came across this large fan, and the only way to shut it down was to create a zombie smoothie. So I threw the meat bait right beside the fan and then drop-kicked the zombies into the blades. But after destroying the fan, the most tedious yet intense hour of my life began. The fight against the Gruesome Twosome. It's also the intro to the next Apex variant, the Clodders. They're really annoying and tanky enemies, their hits do a lot of damage, and they spew blood at you that causes major bleed damage, and sometimes, and in my case, most times, insta-kills you. So after many failed attempts, I took a breath and realized I was just going at this all wrong. In reality, this was nothing more than a war of attrition. See, my original problem was greed. I would try to get too many hits in and then either miss a dodge or get cornered by the runners. But all I needed was patience. So my new strategy was to run around the arena until a clotter spawned in front of me. I tried my best to block its attack and then perform 1 to 3 kicks, rinse and repeat. And this was an incredibly long process and took me about an hour and a half. But once I killed one of them, the other one was a piece of cake. Well, kinda. And after a swift exchange of GGs, we continue our trek to the main stage. And now we're tasked with more speaker overloading, but this time we can use some of the environment to our advantage. This stage has a few areas that shoot fire, and conveniently they're right beside the speakers. So I threw the meat bait in the middle of the runway and used the fire to take out a good chunk of the zombies. I couldn't use any fire for the second set of speakers, so I finished off the rest of the horde with some fury. And the little horde that spawned in at the end was no match for me, or my slick dodging abilities. At the nightclub is where we have to get creative. There's 2 tanky slobbers, a whipper, and a mini horde of zombies blocking the door. My first attempt, I went in guns blazing and confident, but was very quickly humbled and realized it was a horrible idea. I needed to be smart about this, so I lured a few enemies away at a time so I wouldn't be overwhelmed. Then I finished off the whipper and lured over a slobber with a chem bomb. Slobbers are super tanky and can inflict a lot of damage if they hit you with their caustic bile, which is something that I know all too well. This section took me a few attempts, but I eventually got it down after a few hours. And then on the way back to Grace's compound, a mini horde of zombies was waiting to ambush me outside. Usually there isn't a mutator here, but like the true gentleman he was, he escorted me back from the nightclub. But on a serious note, things probably went as you could expect. And on my second attempt, I took out the zombies similar to before. I lured a few away to their impending doom. And once all of them were taken care of, I made quick work of the crushers with some intense fury kicking. At Trader Ways, I used a combination of kicking and ground pounds to clear most of the horde by the speaker. Once I got close to destroying one, a clotter spawned in, so I had to make sure to be constantly moving around the arena and use an organ ball to stun it. And I actually have no idea how the other speaker was destroyed, but hey, a win is a win. So I finished off the rest of the zombies in fury. Also, this mission is kind of repetitive because we're being tasked with doing the same thing at the squirm stage, but this one was a little bit easier. There were a ton of zombies with explosives, so I would just throw meat bait at the speaker and set off an explosive, and it would do a lot of damage. And the last set of speakers we have to destroy is at Cinemoy's Tiki Bar. This one was definitely the hardest so far because there were 2 clotters and a lot of zombies. After managing to destroy one of the speakers, I ended up using the organ ball to take care of the clotters and finished off a bulk of the zombies in fury. The next mission brings us to Ocean Avenue to the OSK store. There, everything instantly turned to chaos because somehow everything was on fire, I was bleeding, and everything was being electrocuted. But I quickly got my bearings and got everything under control. I used my ground pound to take care of the spiky enemies and had some help from the slobber, and I also have no idea where he vanished to, but I didn't end up having to kill him, which I was obviously super torn up about. After our detour, we get to the main stage and have to save Grace from the beat. Immediately after starting this fight, I thought this is where I was gonna throw in the towel. I had to fight a butcher, a vicious butcher, a fire slobber, an inferno crusher, and regular enemies. But after dying, I realized the 2 butchers weren't even supposed to be there and once again followed me to the arena. And after about a half an hour, I had kicked everything to a bloody pulp and was left with a 1v1 with a slobber. And things were looking pretty good. I had whittled his HP down to a sliver, but I was going against everything I had learned so far. Instead of taking my time and playing it safe, I just wanted the fight to end, so I was trying to land as many kicks as I could. But my dreams were crushed. So I had to redo the entire section over again, but this time I ended up taking my time and finished him off. And after finishing him off, I thought that was the end of the mission, but was surprised by a mutator. I needed to think fast. I knew fighting a mutator up close was probably a bad call because one wrong move and I would be insta-killed and have to redo the entire mission over again. But then I had an epiphany. Fire. That's right. Even though it'll probably take me an hour, I'm gonna light this mutator on fire repeatedly until he perishes to ash. And that's exactly what I did, even though it took a very long time. Speaking of extremely long time, now we're on to the final boss. This is also something I was dreading for the entire challenge because on my first playthrough of SOLA on a brand new game with no masochist card and using all of my weapons, it took me multiple attempts. But it actually ended up going better than I expected. Of course, let's get the obvious here out of the way, I died a lot, but the final boss was basically like every other mission. You just have to destroy the speaker, but this time you just have to avoid Dirge, the final boss, the huge Clodder. There's a handful of waves, and after each one the boss will resonate with the speaker in the front of the map, and we'll have a chance to throw a ball at him to make him vulnerable and then inflict some damage. To damage him, I did a combination of kicks and ground pounds. And after a certain amount of damage is done to him, he disappears and then the next wave begins. I found the wave with the Inferno Crusher to be the hardest because it's a really tight area and there are a few times where I was cornered and fighting for my life.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something.
After repeating this process for 2 hours and defeating all of the waves, I finally got the final Orgon Ball and threw it right at Dirge's. And there you have it. You can beat Dead Island 2's SOLA DLC on New Game Plus with the masochist difficulty whilst only kicking. Well, mostly kicking. Now thinking about it, this challenge was pretty hard, but doable if you're patient, which is something that I'm not, so this challenge was pretty annoying. But if you're a fan of Dead Island, I really recommend that you try this challenge out if you want a different way to play the game. Also, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for 500 subscribers and all the love on my last video. It really means a lot to me. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe if you want to see what I drop in the future. And until the next one, see ya!